Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Benjamin Clare. I'm French, as you may hear. My focus and area of expertise is in small-scale mining, community mining, or artisanal mining, as we call it, and the challenges that artisanal mining communities face in various parts of the world. And more specifically now, through blockchain, I'm working on identifying ways to better engage with those community-level challenges and leverage the supply chain and ethical consumerism to make the right decision at the level of these mining communities. I'm going to try to explain a use case for how ethical consumerism can work in a decentralized world. You've all heard, I suppose, or most of you have heard of conflict minerals. Those minerals that are produced in random parts of the world by small-scale mining communities that have funded armed conflict in some parts of the world and that end up being used in your daily product. It's used in your mobile phones, it's used in every electronics. And actually, if you're familiar with the company Fairphone, they actually tell quite a nice story about these minerals. You may also have heard recently about child labor in cobalt mining, in Congo in particular. Have some journalists turning up, identifying some children working in a mine, making a story about it, and it's front page of the New York Times. And the question is, what do we do as ethical consumers? And what does an ethical brand do about these issues? Right? The first thing you want to know as an ethical consumer is, is the product I'm buying, is the product I'm selling in the case of a brand, is it actually related to these issues that I'm hearing about in the newspaper? And that is quite a challenge. To this day, no single company in the world, even the most sophisticated brands, is able to tell you what mines their products come from. None of them is able to tell you seriously that a given mine in the DRC in Congo is not part of their supply chain. So none of them could brag that they have no responsibility for a problem or that they've done anything to solve the problem. And that's because the supply chains are extremely complex. Sometimes in a mineral supply chain you have 12, 15 intermediaries between a mining community and a consumer product. So how do you do that? Well, let's do it off-chain. We're just going to set up a database and we're going to ask every participant in the supply chain, every industry, every company in the mineral supply chain to give us their information about their list of suppliers, their list of clients of products containing a certain mineral. And then at some point, with everyone's declaration, we're going to be able, in our database, to identify a proof of accountability between, let's say, BMW. I hope there's no one from BMW here. We're going to demonstrate the accountability of BMW for a given mine site because all the successive declaration in the database have told us that, yeah, BMW ultimately is related to that mine. We don't know in what proportion, what volume, but there is a supply chain link between those two. And then what we can do is, all right, let's collect information about that specific mine, collect traceability data, monitoring data, NGO reporting data, and identify what is the state of a specific challenge, child labor, conflict at a given mine site in Congo. BMW is connected to that mine. Let's go and see the BMW and sell them access to that information so that BMW as a brand and you as a buyer of their product, you can actually tell the story of the origin of your supply chain. Now, that centralized model, that database, is simply unrealistic. This model is impossible to implement. First, all the supply chain participants, you're asking them for their data on their customers and suppliers. This is extremely commercially sensitive data. They don't know what as a holder of the data, as a manager of the database, they don't know what I'm going to be doing with that data. Maybe I'm going to market it to their competitors and things like this. So there's an issue of trust of who's managing the database. Another challenge exists in that I'm going to go to BMW and tell them, hey, this mine is in your supply chain. I've demonstrated it. I can't show you the details of all the companies that link you to that mine, but it is in your supply chain. Trust me. No way. They will not trust me. Let alone, when comes that moment when I'm like, hey, if you pay $10 a month, you're going to get a window into that mining community at the origin of your supply chain. And believe me, I'm getting that data myself. You can trust that data. They will not trust that. They will not trust value allocation. They may actually think that I'm generating fake data just for the sake of marketing it to BMW. Enters blockchain, where you disintermediate, you decentralize that data management, and you don't need a third party like myself holding the database. You can implement protocols for distributed management of that database. You can have rules that are transparent, that are public, on how the supply chain accountability from a given mining community all the way to a consumer product, how that accountability is established. Those rules are transparent. I know that signal. And likewise, the rules for allocation of value. When you are a consumer, an ethical consumer, and you want to pay extra money to make sure that the data keeps flowing from the mining communities, that you understand that you're able to monitor the challenges at the start of the supply chain. That value that you pay, there's no central party controlling it, managing the narrative, telling the story on behalf of communities. You can actually have public rules for that value to be directly allocated to those that produce and own the data. And once you've done that, once you have basically a decentralized marketplace for local knowledge to be procured by ethical consumers, bypassing the complexity of the supply chain, what you have is a reward mechanism for transparent behaviors at local level. If you're a gold miner in Congo, you can sell gold into your very complex supply chain. You don't know where it ends up. What if tomorrow you can sell data? And I'm very aware of privacy concern, but data that demonstrate that you've been a responsible gold miner. What if that data becomes available and interesting to someone at the other end of that marketplace? Then, as a gold miner, you can by being transparent, you can attract additional value. So you have this kind of virtuous cycle of compliance, where the more transparent you are, the more value you return for your gold production. That's the idea of, decentralized logic, where trust is redistributed, shall we say, could actually open up a market or develop value in a place where right now there is no value created. And the story of these miners in Congo, in Myanmar, in Colombia as well, we have conflict minerals in Colombia, or so they're called. The story of these miners, the narrative about these mining communities is controlled by journalists, is controlled by sometimes politicized organizations, is controlled by a certification program that's usually very costly and you don't know how the money is spent. Well, in a decentralized world, the value can flow straight from information demand to information providers. The idea is to bring as much information from the ground as possible directly to parties in the supply chain that care the most for it. And these are end users, these are consumers. Supply chain intermediaries don't care. They just want to tick boxes, be compliant, leave me alone, I have a certificate, whatever, I'm fine. And as a result, there's a wealth of knowledge locally from independent sources like journalists, local NGOs active in the fields, the government itself, the miners themselves, exporters, local traders themselves. A whole lot of information does exist about these mining communities. It is striking when you actually visit those mining communities. It's striking how much information there is out there that actually, reinforces your understanding of the current situation, of the local context and what's going on. The idea of this decentralized market for local data is not to tell you as a consumer you're going to see only good data, or you're going to have you're going to receive a certificate that this mining community is clean. The idea is, as a consumer, your accountability, your link to that mine is going to be established. You can't hide behind a long, complex supply chain anymore. You are directly related to that mine, to different proportions, etc. But you are directly related to that mine, and therefore, all this information that's coming from a journalist, I visited this mine, it was terrible. Right now, it looks like distant problems. Tomorrow, that information from the journalist is about a mine that, actually you just established is related to your product. Similarly, information from local stakeholders, from local civil society organizations, community leaders, etc., may also be made available through that channel. That is not to say you're going to trust a given journalist or a community leader or a local trader or even, and specifically not maybe the government, but the combination of that information will be accessible to you to make your own judgment rather than relying on third-party information tampering and interpretation.
So it's not about controlling on the ground, but establishing the link, and then everyone can draw its own conclusions.
Yeah, and the starting point of that is that my previous endeavor was standardized controls on the ground. How can you make international buyers of the stuff feel comfortable that everything has been put in place so to demonstrate that it's compliant? And the problem I ran into was that, why would people trust me about and my team about the conclusion we've come to?
It seems to me that the amount of energy you have to spend to keep the system running, especially if it grows in scale, is so crazy high that I'm actually worrying that to run these systems very soon we will consume more energy than for transportation and all the other things.
There are these kind of issues have been reported about public blockchains in particular. There's not just the energy consumption that's a problem. There's also the number of transactions that can be validated at any given time for any given period, which means that a whole lot of applications that we're already thinking about are practically non-feasible right now. And I wouldn't deny the energy consumption problem of blockchain at the moment, just like I wouldn't deny the scalability issue at the moment. But I think it would be a mistake to focus on these current technological restrictions, which are being addressed, which are being discussed, new algorithms and consensus algorithms and ways to protect a decentralized network without using so much power are being thought through by people much smarter than me. What I think is important is that the path exists now. That the technology still needs to evolve, but what the technology will achieve has already been showed to us. And assuming that the technology improves and does not become an environmental catastrophe, there are a lot of things that we should already be preparing ourselves for.